me just start with what I hope you leave with today. I'm hoping that interviewing is hard and can be kind of emotional, can be challenging. There's lots of ways to approach this, but I hope that you leave this workshop with some clarity on what kind of competencies interviews are going to be looking for in job candidates, particularly jobs in policy, jobs that are outside of academia if you're making that transition, and also some confidence in how to combine your scientific, evidence-based mindset with some storytelling abilities to help answer interview questions. So I can't possibly know all the jobs you might interview for or all the things that are on your CV or resume, but I hope that you can come away from this with both of these things, or at least a little bit of these. So I do want to ask a few questions for the folks who are here. And if you can just go ahead and do like a thumbs up react emoji, it's just helpful for me to see, have you ever been an interviewee? Have you ever interviewed for a policy job ever? Okay, seeing a few. All right, thanks for the reactions. So a few folks have here. And have you ever been an interviewer for a policy job? Have you ever been on the other side of the table? Okay, probably a little bit less. Okay, this is helpful for me to get a sense for it. In this workshop, you're going to chance to prototype both of these roles in a low stakes environment. So keep that in mind. Going to kind of help you prep for both of these. So I'm going to divide my workshop into 3 parts. I'm going to talk about some career competencies. These are the sort of things that you want to demonstrate in your answers to interview questions. A little bit about telling your story, those tactics for communicating those competencies, and then we'll have some actual interview scenario practice. So let's dive right into it. I like to start off with thinking about what is the purpose of a job interview to begin with. Sometimes we get kind of caught up in the details, but I think it's actually best illustrated by this Venn diagram. You want the people interviewing you to feel that you are a good fit for the job that you are interviewing for. But you also don't want to forget about this other side here. You want to feel that this job is a good fit for you. You're looking for signs that that is the case. And then hopefully you get to this middle portion where you mutually agree they're able to offer you a position and you feel good accepting it. So remember, that's what we're trying to get to. All of this is in the service of that mutually agreed upon goal. Everyone feels like you're a good fit for this job. So I'm going to start off with some competencies, and this is where you get to put your sort of thinking like a scientist hat on, thinking about where you have these, what evidence you have of them, and how comfortable you feel talking about them. There are lots of ways to talk about interviewing, but I think the competencies approach is going to be a really useful framework. And it also works for so many different kinds of jobs and policy, and it'll kind of help you make a shift, especially if you're thinking about, if you're more familiar with a scientific or academic mindset or interviewing, this is going to be helpful. So I am curious, what do you think, and you can put this in chat if you have thoughts, interviewers outside of academia in general are looking for? I'm saying outside of academia because for a tenure track, faculty job, research, teaching, and service are very core. But what are qualities, what are competencies interviewers beyond academia might be looking for? Any thoughts? And I have somehow moved my chat. So give me a sec to pull it up. Thank you. Yeah, ability to work in a team. It's a great one. Yeah. Communication skills. You are anticipating so many of these. It's great. Problem solving. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Initiative. These are analytical skills. Yeah, this is fantastic. You guys already have a lot of the sort of things that I'm going to talk about today. Yeah. So I want to give you a framework because there's a lot of these, and some of these you can kind of be grouped together. Leadership skills, another one. You've anticipated a lot of these, and I think that this is going to be helpful to actually go over them in this framework. So I'm going to talk about the NACE career readiness competencies as a really great framework for interviewing, particularly for policy jobs, but also I think really for any jobs outside of academia. NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and they have identified that these are the main core 8 career competencies that prepare the college educated for success in the workplace and for lifelong career management. And so even if you're not necessarily identifying as someone who's just coming out of college, that may or may not be you, but that lifelong career management part, I think, is something that we can all relate to. So these are the key things, and these are the things that I see over and over again as the kind of main buckets that interviewers are looking for in answers to interview questions and in the way you conduct yourself in general when they're evaluating you. And I'm actually going to put a link here in the chat to the NACE career competencies, because this is all drawn from their website, and they have a PDF that has like some really great like sample. I'm going to give you a few examples of each of these, but has even more samples and has even longer descriptions than what I have here. So I'll just read them out, and then my slides, in the next couple of slides, I'll go through these in more detail. Career and self-development, critical thinking, leadership, teamwork, communication, equity and inclusion, professionalism, and technology. These 8 competencies, okay? So I'm going to go through each of these and give a few examples of where you may be already demonstrating this based on things you've already done. But what I want you to do as I go through these is to think about, or even pull up that PDF that I've put in the chat, and sort of think about how you're going to highlight your competencies. Don't be too hard on yourself. That can be a thing that we do sometimes, but try to evaluate, where am I strongest, where are the competencies I feel like I'm strongest in, where am I maybe the weaker areas where I have room for growth. So that's one thing to think about as I discuss these. And then 2, what examples would I give if I needed to give examples from my past experience in an answer to an interview question? Would I be able to do that? How comfortable am I talking about that? So that's a really good way to use this framework. I'll go through these with some definitions and a few examples. Career and self-development, this one's a little bit meta, but essentially this is the ability to proactively develop oneself and one's career through continual personal and professional learning, awareness of one's strengths and weaknesses, navigation of career opportunities, and networking to build relationships within and without one's organization. So an example might be something that you're already doing here, or may have done a little even in the last session, building out your network in the science policy sphere, right? This would be a way. How would you demonstrate? What would be examples of where you've done that? 2, this was something that was already named in the chat here earlier, communication. Clearly and effectively being able to exchange information, ideas, facts, and perspectives with people inside or outside of an organization. And I think communicating to audiences that are not experts in your subject matter area is really key here. So being able to present scientific information to a smart but not expert, non-technical audience, that would be a really good way to demonstrate communication. This can be written communication, it can be oral communication. That one especially is good to get ready and used to talking about and having examples of. Right, next up, 3rd, critical thinking. And I think this goes along, problem solving was mentioned earlier, and analytical skills. I think that all kind of goes into this competency. So that's the ability to identify and respond to needs based on an understanding of situational context and logical analysis of relevant information. So for example, if you've been able to evaluate the relevance of new scientific literature for a hot policy topic, you're able to connect some of that detailed research to a bigger picture. That would be a good way to demonstrate critical thinking skills beyond academia. Equity and inclusion. So this would be demonstrating the awareness, attitude, knowledge, and skills required to equitably engage and include people from different local and global cultures, and anti-racist practices that actively challenge the system, structures, and policies of racism. So for example, maybe seeking out input from underrepresented communities impacted by policy decisions, doing that early, using that to move things forward. That would be a good example, the way to demonstrate equity and inclusion. 5, again, this is one that was called out in the chat. Leadership skills, absolutely, very important. Recognizing and capitalizing on personal and team strengths to achieve organizational goals. And I want to call out, I really like this definition because this doesn't mean that you've been like a supervisor or a manager, right? It just means that you've been able to leverage the strengths of the people around you, that you've been able to help people be goal oriented, right? So you don't necessarily need, even if you are used to being in like a trainee role, there's a lot of ways to demonstrate leadership. It just might be something you're less comfortable with. So talking about how you've motivated and given constructive feedback to students or lab mentees in an academic setting could be ways to demonstrate leadership. Professionalism. So professionalism is just knowing work environments differ greatly, understanding and demonstrating effective work habits and acting in the interest of the larger community and workplace. So just being able to demonstrate dependability to your colleagues or to your team around you would be an example of professionalism. This does differ depending on the work environment, but there are some ways like this that you can demonstrate that in lots of different contexts. Teamwork. This was, I think, the first thing that was said in the chat. So absolutely, this competency, you're able to build and maintain collaborative relationships to work effectively towards common goals while appreciating diverse viewpoints and shared responsibilities. And this is just so critical, being able to be part of an effective team, working together with colleagues. This is so critical. So the example I give here is being able to manage conflict in a team to complete a project, because conflict comes up a lot when you have lots of different viewpoints and lots of different people on a team. And it's something interviewers really like to ask about. So I like to plant that seed early. And then 8, technology. Being able to understand and leverage technologies ethically to enhance efficiencies, complete tasks, and accomplish goals. The example I give here is like identifying appropriate or inappropriate uses of generative AI, but it doesn't need to be like that high level. It could just be if you were used to using Gmail and now you need to use Outlook, are you able to understand and learn how to do that? You'll notice this is the only one that is really like a hard skill, that most of these are what we might traditionally call soft skills. I like to call them human skills. I think that's a good way to understand the kind of competencies that interviewers are looking for. So keep this in mind. We're going to use this framework. Okay. So I went through that pretty quickly because I want to make sure we have some time towards the end here to actually practice these things. So the next part of this is about really shifting from that mindset of like, where do I have evidence? What is this framework for competency? What sort of things are interviewers looking for? Now we're going to think about, how do you tell your story? And particularly, how do you speak like a storyteller? And I'm going to bring up the fact that my background, my PhD is actually in history, in California history, and we think a lot about how to tell stories well, how to include all the things that can really engage someone when you're trying to tell them a story. And you probably know a little about this just from your own life. So I'm going to ask, if people don't mind putting in the chat, what are some elements of a good story? And I'm going to especially cue you to say something that you are listening to, that you're taking in. It's like an oral storytelling or it's audio format, because that's really the format that you are giving answers to in an interview. What are some elements for you of a good story? Any thoughts? What makes a good story? Okay, we've got emotional connection, understanding. It's relatable. It's so important. It's engaging. Yeah. Has a hook, opens well with the hook. There's a clear narrative, a through line. Love that. It's memorable. Yes. These are all excellent. Yeah. Not too many characters or actors involved, so you have the scope of it that's narrowed. Yeah. But you need to have some characters or actors, right? Yeah. The story arc. Yeah. So you already know, you have great examples here already of some elements of a good story. What I have in the next slide, I think, mirrors a lot of that. But I have maybe a few other things to keep in mind as well. So some elements that I'd say are a good story, we already had this a little bit earlier, but that narrative, that through line, the arc, the plot, right? I would even say the most simple form, beginning, middle, end. If you want to get technical, then in storytelling, you might talk about the background, the rising action, climax, and then a resolution, right? But at very least, you need a beginning, middle, and end of your story. Good opening was a good one I didn't have on here. Characters, not too many, but you need some. You need some action, some interesting details. You have to think about how many, not too many, but you need some. Good delivery or tone, I think, for an audio format. If someone is listening to you is helpful. Like, can I deliver this? And do I need to emphasize this word rather than this one? The word choice that you pick as well. Those are some good elements of a story. And so I want you to think about those when you're thinking about how to tell your story. And it's really the reasons, why you want to think of it as like a storytelling, a little bit more of an art when it comes to interviewing, is for some of the same reasons that you all put in the chat. It's more memorable to do it this way. If I told you a story about my life, you're probably going to recall that a lot better than a list of 10 skills that I gave you, right, about myself. It's just easier to remember. It's far more engaging. And it particularly will help you with non-specialist audiences, like an audience who doesn't share, a policy audience who doesn't share the same jargon from a scientific discipline, who may not even care about that. You really need to get them engaged. So that's a good way to think about it, is like you're doing that in an interview, you're telling a story. It's also really impactful because you can highlight multiple competencies in one story. This is a really effective technique for interviewing, is using a story that covers multiple competencies, so you don't have to have separate stories for each one. And it's also just very human. I know some folks said in the chat that you want a story to be relatable. Well, people can relate to a narrative. And after all, they are hiring or looking to hire a person. Hopefully, I guess, not a robot, not an AI to do this work. They're looking for a human. So you tell a good story. The two kinds of stories that come up most often in interviewing are an elevator pitch story and a star story. So I'm not going to talk as much about the first, but I did want to include it. These are the kind of stories that people will remember if they're an interviewer in a job hiring situation. So the first is the elevator pitch. It's usually the first thing that you share about yourself. This is the highlights story, as I call it. Essentially, the elevator pitch question always answers some version of tell me about yourself, or maybe tell me about yourself and your research and why you want this job, some version of that. And then STAR stories, it's an acronym, and if you haven't heard it, I'll get to it in the later slides, are basically some specific example stories. They answer questions about your past behavior. And these are incredibly common. Most interviewers will have some version or some kind of a question where you can use a STAR story, where it will be best to demonstrate what you've done using kind of a past example. They use that because past behavior is a really good predictor of future behavior. So the good news is you can practice this ahead of time and get used to this format. So there's so much we could talk for an entire workshop about elevator pitches. I would love that. But I like to think about the elevator pitch story format as, in its most simple, a short narrative. I think you could even do it in just a past, present, future format and cover all of your bases. Past being what have you done, or what is your background, kind of the context there. Present, who are you right now? What are you doing right now? And then future is like, where are you looking to go? That sort of career self-development, or why this job, why now? That's the simplest version of the elevator pitch story. It's really just a simple narrative arc. I'd say if you are preparing for interviews, get really used to telling the story, because it's the one you're going to tell some version of the most often. Usually the first thing people hear. But I think what trips people up, this is one you can practice and be familiar with, is really the STAR stories. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. But really, it's kind of what you were identifying earlier of like that narrative through line and that story arc. It's a story with a beginning, middle, and end. The situation, a past situation that you were in, that's the background, that's the beginning. Task is also kind of the beginning, is what the specific thing that you were doing, that you needed to do. The action, what did you actually do? That's that middle. It's typically like that climax part of the story. And then the results. This is the part I think people most often kind of leave out or shortchange. So get used to talking about what happened in the end. What was the outcome? How did your action connect to that result? So the STAR story format is the format that you want to use to answer questions about past behavior. These are typically questions that say, tell me about a time when, or give an example of, but they might not necessarily have that, but you could use a past example to illustrate. That's also a place where you can use a STAR story. But anytime you're asked for something specific from the past, this is the format to go to. And I love it because if you bring these two things together, if you bring the STAR story format and the NACE career competencies, you can think about answering behavioral questions to highlight your competencies. So for example, if you were asked, give an example of when you worked on a team to solve a problem, to use a couple of the qualities, the competencies that were brought up earlier, and then what was your role? You would think of answering this in a way that demonstrates your competency in teamwork and critical thinking. Same with this question here on the right. Tell us about a time when you had a conflict with a colleague. How did you handle it? Your answer there can demonstrate professionalism, teamwork, communication, probably other ones as well, depending on the team. But this is a great way to think about, how do I want to tell my story? How can I make sure I'm highlighting these competencies that I know are really critical for interviewers? So just in general, if you are thinking about preparing for policy job interviews, you want to think about your STAR stories. And I know this can sound like a lot, but this can save you a lot of, reinventing the wheel every time you have an interview. You do want to prepare specifically for that audience and that job. But if you prepare, say 5 to maybe even up to 7, but at least 5 of your own STAR stories, like get really used to telling past stories that highlight those competencies, they can be used to answer many questions. If you have one that talks about your communication skills and your teamwork skills, you could use that for either. If you have one that talks about leadership as well as equity and inclusion, you can use that for multiple different types of questions. So you want to pick stories that show multiple competencies. And then I tend to recommend that you make a bullet point list of the key points to remember, like the situation, task, action, results, like key parts for each, rather than writing it out word for word. There are exceptions to this. I would say the reason to do bullet points is because we speak differently than we write. And if you are reading something that you wrote, it can often sound a little bit unnatural and be a little bit more difficult for an interviewer to follow. So if you did want to write it out the whole way, I would suggest using like talk to text and like say it so that you can see how you actually speak it. But bullet points work great. And then this is the key thing. If you remember nothing else from this workshop, one really important thing to do as you're preparing to actually be in a job interview situation, answer interview questions, practice saying your stories and your answers out loud in kind of a natural speaking tone. There's no substitute for this. Even if you're more comfortable in a situation where you are writing things out or have a lot of time to prepare, like you want to get used to speaking things out loud and figuring out the way that works for you. Whatever works, whatever way seems the most natural and reflects who you are. So, great. I've been talking a lot. Don't worry, you're going to get a chance to talk to each other soon here. I do want to give you an example STAR story because I feel like it's easier to see if you have an example. So let's say you got a question about, like, tell me about a time when you worked on a team to solve a problem. right? So instead of including every possible detail or kind of jumping around in the order or being kind of vague and like, well, we kind of had this problem, but we did this, you would be prepared, right? You would think and have your bullet points about a situation. Maybe you were a graduate student in a lab working on a research project. There are 3 labs that are working on this project. They all want to do stuff to be able to publish together. They don't talk very often. They're not in regular communication. And your task is you've been asked to sort of coordinate with all of them to meet a deadline, right? So you think about describing all of the actions you did. Like, I set up some milestones, like here's what we need to get done when. I sent friendly email reminders. I thought about how we should avoid having a meeting at odd hours or holidays in different countries, because that's not going to be a good time for everyone, right? You take all these actions and you talk about that result. You got them to communicate more regularly, or you were able to submit that research for publication, or at least you improved rapport among the different labs and the team members on those labs, right? So you think about putting it into this format, whatever your example is. Great. Hope you're still with me so far. Because it's time for you to actually practice a little bit of this. Some interview scenarios, you're going to practice coming up with an interview question based on a job description, asking that question, and having someone at least take a stab at answering that, and then trading off. I know that that's a lot to ask without a lot of prep. However, one of the best things to do to get ready for an interview is to prototype, to actually practice being in this scenario. And for many folks that I've talked to, their interviewing skills, their qualities, their ability to describe themselves as an interviewee got better once they'd been on the other side of the table, been an interviewer and had to come up with a question and ask a question and try to get a question that aligned with the job description. So I'm going to task you with that. I'm going to give you some actual job descriptions with the information stripped out and ask you to use what you are learning, what I've just given you here today, and come up with a question, have your partner try to answer it, and trade off. So this is going to be a scenario activity, and I am going to put a link in the chat here. And I think that this should give you a view link to the full description, the job descriptions, and a more detailed description of what to do for this activity. Can someone just verify that they're able to, that's a view link, that they're able to see it? Yeah, okay, I got a thumbs up. Cool. Okay, so let me give you the short version, and then again, all the details are in this document as well. So here's your scenario. Imagine you are hiring, you're the hiring manager. The person is going to hire someone for a policy job, and you will be that person's direct supervisor. It's just an imagination scenario. I know it's hypothetical. You have been tasked with writing one behavioral interview question. So a question that asks about past behavior. It needs to be about one of these career competencies. So one of these areas that from reading the job description, you can see this is something we'll need from someone in this job. So you're tasked with writing a one behavioral interview question about one career competency that will help you select a strong candidate. So what I'm going to have you do is read through the job descriptions. There are 2 you can pick based on the description. There's one that's a little bit more early career, one mid-career, one that's actually in the legislature, one that's in a nonprofit. So you can pick which one you would prefer. And then thinking about those competencies we've just talked about and that you have a handout on, draft, try out, this is prototyping, draft a behavioral interview question. What would you want to ask? What sort of past behavior would you want to ask about? So this is going to take, you're going to take some time to do this. I think it's going to take maybe, 5 to 10 minutes to like read and come up with this question. Then you're going to ask your question to your partner and hopefully try to have them answer that. Again, they didn't apply for this job, so if they're like, I don't have an answer to that, that's totally fine. You just want to practice. You want to try it out if you can, if you're able to, come up with something. And then switch off. Have them ask their question, take a stab at answering it. You have the format for how to answer a question as well, that situation, task, action, result. Again, low stakes here. We're going to be doing this in real time. It's just really great way to actually practice this. So if I can, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. And let's give folks, let's see how much time we have here. We have until, is it 20 minutes past the hour, Rita?
We have until 10 till, so 6:50 Eastern, 3:50 Pacific.
Okay, great. So I'm going to say that this is a 20-minute activity because I want you to actually dig into this. And we can give a cue halfway through, and then we'll bring people back after to debrief and talk about how did it go? Were you able to do this? Is there anywhere you got stuck? What kind of questions did you come up with? What kind of answer did the person come up with? And I think there's some instructions in the document if you want to make a copy for yourself, and then you're able to take notes there. So we're going to do breakout rooms with groups of 2 to 3. So we weren't able to add with the breakout room setup to give you a little bit more time. And I know that probably went quickly. And you may not have been able to get through all of those tasks. I want to thank you for being willing to do that anyway. And honestly, this is a little bit of a meta exercise because being given something on the fly and being asked to work with a team and try out your responses on the fly is actually a pretty great learning experience for working in the policy world. And I think it's good to challenge yourself, even if this was something you were trying to do on the spot. So I would love to hear from the groups who were able to get through some of it. How did it go? What challenges did you find in this? And what sort of insights do you have to share? So, and this one you can put in the chat if you'd prefer, or if you would like to unmute yourself and share verbally, be happy for either of those. I know it'd be helpful for others to hear.
Hi, I'm Jessica.
Yeah.
I just had a meeting with Jennifer and Alyssa, and we really took the whole time to answer one question that Alyssa had experienced in a previous interview that was asking about a time that you had to work with someone that there was tension and conflict, and how did you get through that. So all of us, we got to really kind of off the top of our heads think about what situation, and we were able to go back and forth into our topics or into our answers and break it down with the STAR method and bring it back to the core competencies. And it was actually super helpful to talk it out because we highlighted things in the other person's answers because we were all ended up answering the same question. So we highlighted in the other person's answers how it related back to the core competencies. And we were like, oh, that's how we'll answer it next time. So it was really helpful.
Oh, that's great. I'm not surprised that you weren't able to get through multiple questions, but I'm glad everyone was able to take a stab at answering the one, and the highlighting others' competencies is great. What great teamwork. And as anyone else, it can be from a different group or that group, put in the chat. Oh, yes, I see this here in the chat. Yeah, that question of how you communicate something complex to someone who doesn't have the same background as you, it's such a great thing to be practicing doing that, because if you're trained as a scientist used to talking to other scientists, this is going to take some practice. But at least starting off with other folks who are not in your same field is a good starting point. Here, figuring out what they hear in your answer. That's great. Thank you for sharing that, David. Other thoughts? Any insights, any challenges with this? How is it trying to come up with a question? Coming up with a question as an interviewer was harder than I expected. Yeah, thank you. Natalie, for sharing that. Yeah, this is not, I did not give you the easiest scenario. I very much put you on the spot to be like, here's what you're looking for. What question do you want to ask? It is incredibly valuable to try to think like the interviewer, though, to think, I need a person who can do A, B, and C. I need someone who can really work on these areas. Here's what they're going to be in charge of. Like, here's what we really need. What question will help me, elicit an answer that speaks to those things, it speaks to those competencies, right? How do I want to word it? What sort of past behavior do I want to hear about? Yeah. Are there any other thoughts? Can I ask, was this a useful exercise? If you anything, was this something that was helpful, even if it was a bit of a challenging one, right? You've thrown together, didn't have a lot of time, but you're starting to think about it. Okay. I'm glad that it was at least that. So if you take nothing away from this, it is challenging to be both an interviewer and an interviewee, but once you have that framework of the competencies to think about what am I looking for here? What do I want to highlight if I'm the interviewer, and have that star story format for how to answer it in a narrative format. These are the ways this is going to come up again and again, different jobs, different stages of your career. I think that this is a really useful thing to take this kind of practice when you are actually faced with a job interview. And I know there was not time to get to the bonus question, but the final thing to think about when you are doing this is at the end of an interview, you typically have a little bit of time, if there's time left over, to ask your own question. So hopefully this helps you think about, what would I want to ask this interviewer? What do I want to know? I want them to, you probably want them to have these competencies too, if you want to work with these folks. What do you want to ask them? You remember the purpose of that job interview. You're looking for that mutual good fit, both that they think you're a good fit based on those competencies, but also that you do as well. Keep that in mind. You are also assessing them throughout the process. So hopefully this will help you to get a little bit better at both asking and answering interview questions. So, and also if you're interested, and these are real jobs. So if you were like, I actually want to apply for that, you can email me. I will send you the actual details instead of the stripped down version. I'm going to just share my screen one last time to remind you of who I am, what I do, and to kind of close this out. I think we can actually we're going to end this one a little bit early because this was designed as a slightly shorter session. Just as a reminder, my job is a Science Fellows Program Manager at CCST. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is the 15th year of the CCST Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. We've trained 172 PhD scientists, social scientists, and engineers in science policy. The next round of applications doesn't open until December. For the fellowship that begins November 1st, 2025, but it's never too early to start thinking about that if that's something that might be in your future. So just want to highlight that's what I do, and have really loved being able to talk to you today about those competencies and how to tell your story and interviewing skills. So I will put this in the chat as well, but happy to stay connected. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can email me as well. And if you have follow-up questions, I would love to connect with you. So I'll stop my share for now, and I'm going to give you back a little bit of your time.